a couple of you mentioned this in the responses that you just sent in, is you're concerned about the exam. And I briefly said this, and I'm going to say this again and again and again over the next, what is it, 10 months or so until we get to next May, is there are 4 sections to the exam. And I promise you, the way that they look on this screen right here is what they're going to look like on the final exam on May 7th. That date is not changing. Come hell or high water, on May 7th at, I think it's 8 a.m., we will be taking the exam. This exam is broken up into 2 parts. There's section 1, which will take 55 minutes for section 1 part A and 40 minutes for section 1 part B. There will be a 10-minute break, and then there will be section 2, which is an hour and 40 minutes continuous, but there are 2 parts to that, but we'll get into that in a little bit. The first part is the multiple choice questions. These are, in my opinion, the most challenging, but that's only because the College Board in world history is trying to trick students. I'm going to teach you how to beat their tricks. There are 55 questions in 55 minutes, and it counts for 40% of the total exam score. These are easy. If you get 30 or better, you are in very good shape. Don't let 55 questions in 55 minutes. That's a minute per question. Don't let that freak you out right now. We will figure out how to beat that. I promise you it's going to be okay. Section 1 part B is where the writing starts, and it begins with the short answer questions. There are 4 short answer questions, but you only have to answer 3 of them. Each one is made up of parts 1, 2, and 3, or parts A, B, and C. So there will be 3 points for each question, and there will be 9 points total out of your 3. 3 times 3 is 9. That's 20% of the exam, but the short answer questions, once I teach you how to do them, they are the easiest 9 points that you can get on this exam. It is so easy. I expect right now, even all of you will get all 9 of those points for 20% of that score. Section 2 is where it gets a little bit more challenging for the writing, but that's okay, because it doesn't look like any of you have taken an AP history class before, but you may have been exposed to free response questions. That's all these are. They're just longer free response questions. The first and the biggest part of the exam, the one that this is what historians do, is the document-based questions. You will be given 7 documents, and from those 7 documents, you will have to answer a prompt that makes an argument. There will be 6 documents that are made up of text, and there's going to be 1 document that will be an image of some kind, a graph, a map, a chart, something like that. You take those 6 documents and you write an argumentative essay. It should take you no more than 5 or 6 paragraphs, and you can do that in an hour. We're gonna practice. We're gonna get up there. It's gonna be okay. The last section of the test is the second half of section 2, is the long essay question. The long essay question is very similar to the document-based question, but there's only 6 points total, and there are 0 documents. You have to know it, and it's going to be okay. And somebody wrote in their getting to know you thing that you're worried about memorizing all the dates. Don't worry about that. I promise you it's going to be okay. They're broad enough that you can answer it any way that you can, or any way that you're able to, and you'll be okay with it. The best part about history is you can't be wrong so long as you can back up your argument with evidence. And that's all this exam is about, is using evidence to back up an argument. That's all this class is about. To accomplish those 4 sections on the exam, we go through 6 different skills that we have in advanced placement world history. And this is true for advanced placement US history and advanced placement European history as well. If you look at our historical thinking skills, we worry about developments and processes. We identify and explain historical developments. How did the French Revolution happen? Why, like, what caused it to happen? It doesn't matter that it happened in 1789. You all will know that because that's one of the important dates. But it doesn't really matter that it happened then. It matters why it happened and the outcomes of it. So we look at developments and processes. The second skill that we're worried about, the skill right here, sourcing and situation. We analyze sources and situate primary and secondary sources to help develop our own arguments. And if you don't know what a primary or secondary source is, that's okay. I'll explain it. I'll explain all of this to you. The third thing that we worry about is claims and evidence and sources. So this is, we're analyzing the sources in much more depth, and deciding what a primary source says about a topic or what a secondary source says about a topic, the next thing that we do is we contextualize. So what the French Revolution happened? Well, the so what is because the French Revolution happened, the Haitian Revolution happened. It also helped inspire the Latin American revolutions. That's the context of it. How or why did the French Revolution happen? Well, partly because the Enlightenment happened before that. That's how we contextualize something. The next thing that we want to do is make connections. Use those historical reasoning processes that we've developed all the way through here to determine compare something, to determine causation, and to determine continuity or changes over time. That's our subject specific emphases. Those three C's: comparison, causation, change, and continuity over time. Compare the French Revolution to the American Revolution. How are they similar? How are they different? What caused the American Revolution? Taxation is the easy answer. The Intolerable Acts, the Townsend Acts, the et cetera, everything. And continuities and changes over time. What sorts of continuities or changes do you see between America before the American Revolution and America after the American Revolution? Did the United States of America not just throw off the British aristocracy and then in turn the American aristocracy became a thing? Changing continuity over time. The final skill we're worried about is argumentation, how to develop an argument. This is what all historians do. Once you develop an argument, there will be, if you do it in a paragraph, there will be no difference between you developing that one paragraph argument and I developed an argument in 277 pages of my monograph. There's no difference except for I did it in 270 pages, you did it in one paragraph. That's what we do as historians. And very soon you all will be historians as well. Just to give a little bit more insight into this, our reasoning processes, this is our subject specific emphasis. This is what historians are concerned about. All we care about is comparisons, causation, or change in continuity over time. We describe similarities or differences between different developments, different processes, explain relevant similarities or differences between those developments or processes, explain the significance of similarities or the significance of the differences between those. We want to use comparison to our benefit in our arguments. Our next reasoning process is causation. It's right there in the name, right? Describe the causes and effects of historical developments or processes. Explain the relationship between the causes and effects. Explain the differences between primary and secondary causes, between short and long-term effects. Explain how relevant context influenced a specific historical development or process. Explain the relevant historical significance of different causes and or effects. That's, you all know how to do cause and effect already. What happens if you forget to pay the electric bill? The power company will shut your lights off. Cause and effect. It's no different than what happens if you force too many taxes onto the peasant class. Well, they'll rise up and they'll revolt, whether you're in France, whether you're in America, whether you're in Russia, whether you're in China. That's cause and effect. And then continuities and changes over time. We'll describe patterns of continuity and change over time. What has stayed steady and what has completely altered. I can think of 3 revolutions off the top of my head where basically the entirety of society went like this and flipped over like this. The French Revolution that happened, or did it? Was that just a continuity when we went from King Louis XVI to the radical phase of the revolution to Napoleon? King, emperor, what's the difference really? Or is there a complete change? You go from an autocratic czar like Tsar Nicholas II in 1917 to completely flipping that on its head, and then you have the Politburo is in charge after the Russian Civil War during the Russian Revolution. Or you go from another monarchy in China, and then Mao Zedong, after he wins the Civil War, completely flips China onto its head, and it becomes the Chinese Communist Party instead of the last emperors. That's what we're looking at. Those are our reasoning processes. Thumbs up in chat if you're with me, or thumbs down if you're not with me. I love the responses. Thanks, guys. A couple of concepts that I want you guys to be aware of. I don't know if you can notice this or not, but I am a white guy and I have a very white American accent. And I was taught in the United States of America. So, what we have to be care of is there are a couple of terms. These may not be real words. Google doesn't seem to think that they're real words. I am going to add them to my personal dictionary, though, because I think they are. Eurocentrism, Western centrism, or Amerocentrism. That viewing the world as if it only comes from a European perspective or a Western perspective or an American perspective. You all know very well that America is not the only place in the world. Uh, but a lot of textbooks, and for the last 200 years, history has been a discipline for about 200 years now. And it's only been within the last 40 or 50 years that we've started to look at other ways to view history. There's 1,000 ways that don't involve the United States and the president of the United States as the only mover and shaker of history. So just be aware of that as we're going through this. We are going to focus on some Western centric, or not Western centric, on some Western countries and Western leaders and Western ideas. But keep in mind that it is just part of the larger whole. The other thing that I want you to be aware of is something called teleology. Teleology is a concept that means that history is a story where there's a natural progression of events that only happened one way. This is where we get into the idea of maybe like a counterfactual or something like that. So the idea that one thing led to another and ultimately this event had to happen. Well, no, this event didn't have to happen. We have to remove ourselves from our present understanding of what happened. You all probably have a favorite part of history that you know more than I do about it, that you can you can explain it inside and out. You know everything there is to know about it. I also have something like that. Like I enjoy learning about certain parts of history, but understanding that as if it was the only way that history could have happened removes us from being able to understand the overall process of how that event unfolded, what could have happened, how many different directions it could have gone, what happens if Chiang Kai shek wins the Civil War. China and the entire world look entirely different, right? There was no determined way that Mao Zedong was going to win the war. There was no determination that Vladimir Lenin was going to beat the Russian White Army. We have to understand that as we're moving through history. The other thing to be aware of is to understand your perspective in history. I think most of us are in North America, and if you're not, please forgive me. But can you all see this map okay? Can you tell me what's wrong with this map?
It's upside down.
It's upside down. Says who? I'm doing a bit. Don't worry. You're not in trouble or anything. But yeah, when we look at this map, we look at it as upside, or we see it as upside down because we're so used to seeing it inverted with Canada on the top left and the United States right underneath Canada, and Brazil on the top. However, there is nothing in time and space. And wait till you take AP physics or AP astronomy, and they'll tell you that up is only up because of our perspective. Like we only think of it as up and over that way because we've been shown the Mercator projection of the map for most of our lives. Just keep in mind what your perspective is and how looking at something, looking at an event in history from a different perspective might help you understand it better. So the big question is, what is history? And somebody was just very brave, Angela. I think that was you. You were very brave and you came off mute. Thank you so much. I generally am curious what you guys think history is. It doesn't have to be this big, grand definition. Just what do you think history is? That's what I'd like to pose to you. I see Ashley put a chat. Okay, so Ashley says the past. That is true. So when does the past start? Or when does it end? Okay, so everything the past times recording, so stuff that's happened in the past. Gotcha, gotcha. I'll tell you what I think history is. History is the past, but it's so much more than just that. What does the past mean? It's this ethereal thing that's untouchable, unknowable, until we quantify it into something that's relatable. And there are so many different types of history and historians that we can do. You can be a geographic historian. You could study British history. You could study Chinese history, West African history. I am an historian and historian of Germany. Like I studied Germany since the French Revolution. Like that's my specialty. You can be a temporal historian. You could study the Renaissance, 20th century American history, ancient history, whatever you're the most fun thing you can think of. You can be that type of historian. Cultural. Well, what was the culture like back then? Salons, etc. Environmental history. You can study how the environment affects human behavior and society. Art history. Art history is another big one. I had a lot of friends in graduate school who studied art history. Social history, how people work, African American history, women's history, oral history. Way back when, and these are still valid ways to view history, but way back when history was first a discipline, it was either political history, so that means the kings and the presidents and the generals, military history, where it was just the generals and wars, or economic history, which was the generals and the presidents making decisions that affected the economy. But there are so many ways to view history uh, that don't include just the facts, just dates, and just numbers. It's not history is not just kings and rulers and leaders. It's not just war and battles. Wars, battles, kings, leaders, all those facts and dates, like they matter, but only to a certain extent. Again, I care so much less that the French Revolution happened in seven or the first French Revolution happened in 1789. That matters like this much, just a little bit. The thing that I'm interested in and that most historians are interested in is the processes, excuse me, of how we got to the French Revolution, how we got to uh, the fall of the Roman Empire, how we got to, it doesn't matter that it happened in 476. It didn't really, but that's if somebody asks you on Jeopardy, say 476. What matters so much more is processes, how you can use those to make an argument. Generally, no, the French Revolution happened after the American Revolution, but it doesn't matter that the American Revolution happened in 1776 and the French Revolution happened in 1789, or the Haitian Revolution happened in 1802. It matters more that American Revolution first, then French Revolution, then Haitian Revolution. Things like that matter, less so just the numbers, just the dates, just the facts. How do we do history as historians? There are three major categories of history. There's only two that we're going to, I'm sorry, there's only one that we're going to work with in this class for the most part. We are limited by time and by space because we're not together. We're doing this virtually. There's oral history, so events, oral stories, information shared between individuals. Every time your parents or grandparents or somebody older than you has passed down a story of from their childhood, that is a form of oral history. Think back to before the invention of writing. As a humans had the invention of writing, they shared stories orally. Are you familiar with there's a new movie coming out, I think it's next year, about the Odyssey. Are you familiar with the story of the Odyssey? Homer and the great poems? Well, there's only two really great ones that we know about from Homer. Do you guys know those ones? The Iliad and the Odyssey from Greek mythology with Zeus and all those people? Yeah, yeah, you've heard about it. We do not know what the original version of the Odyssey was like because it was passed down orally for potentially centuries before somebody finally wrote it down. And when they finally wrote it down, we have what we call written history. So, recorded written testimony from a living witness or a narrative record or some sort of previous history, a memoir, a letter, literature, financial records, legal records, legislatures, religious institutions, businesses, those types of things that are written down. Seems pretty obvious, but that's written history. And that is what we're going to primarily deal with in this class. There's another type of history called physical history. It's unwritten information from physical remains of past civilizations. It's stuff, architecture, arts and crafts, pottery. There is so much pottery in the ancient world that is physical history. Burial grounds, arts and crafts, any type of cultivated land, that kind of stuff is physical history. We've already kind of gone over this, but how do we use those types of history? How do we use our three major categories of history to do history? Is we evaluate evidence that we have, we critically assess historical sources, and the sourcing that we do. I'm going to ask you guys to consider who wrote the document as well as the circumstances of its creation, who authored it, when, for what purpose, things like that. We're going to contextualize it, how, like, locate a document in time and place and understand how those factors shaped its content. And then we're going to try and corroborate it as best as we can. The closer we get to the present day, the more information or the more corroborating documents we'll usually have. So, for example, uh, 2000 years ago, if you find one piece of paper that has one line or one sentence written on it, that may be the only record that that person ever existed. It's going to be very difficult to corroborate it, but we'll try as hard as we can to do that. That's how we do historical thinking. Um, we gain historical knowledge to allow our thinking, encompassing the various ways to know about the past, including the information, recognition, and recall of important factual data. You all, I know it's scary right now because there is a lot that we're going to cover in this class, but you all will be able to recognize and recall important factual data. I bet you already know when the French Revolution began because I've said it to you several times today. Does anybody know when the French Revolution began and wants to be brave and tell me? We're also going to worry about his significance of stuff. It's going to require you to evaluate the importance of people and events and various histories that you deal with, periodize things, group ideas and events by the era that they come from. The age of revolutions is the early 19th century. We periodize the early 19th century because so many revolutions happened there. Narrative will do deep knowledge of how the past unfolded over time to create a long story or a long narrative of what happened. First, this happened. First, the Renaissance happened. Then, the scientific revolution happened. Then, the Enlightenment happened. Then, from the Enlightenment came the Revolutionary period or the Age of Revolutions. Then came the Romantic era. So, we'll know how the past generally unfolded. We'll do all that to make our arguments. And so throughout this class, I want you guys to try and remember, what color are your lenses? What is your perspective? How does your own background and culture and experience influence your understanding of the world and influence your understanding of world history? I guarantee you, as a 30-something-year-old white man from America, I have a vastly different background and culture and experience than you all do as teenagers still in school, doing your own thing, mostly in Canada. Our perspectives are different. That means we can bring different things to our understandings of history. That is a double slide that I wasn't supposed to have up there. So earlier I told you, and I know I'm front loading you a lot, and in a little bit we're going to take a break so we can have a restroom break for real quick. But just bear with me through this. We'll get through this and take a break, and then we'll come back and pick up. But there are two types of sources that we deal with in history. There's primary sources and there's secondary sources. There's also something called tertiary sources, but that's mostly scientists use tertiary sources. We don't really use those in history. A primary source is what historians mostly deal with. It's a direct or firsthand evidence about an event, an object, a person, or a work of art, or something like that. An example of primary sources, I've got so many listed here. I just want to point them out. An autobiography or a memoir. Think of a figure throughout history who wrote an autobiography. That can be a primary source for that period. Diaries, personal letters, correspondence, interviews, surveys, field work, things that oral historians do, photographs, drawings, posters, works of art, literature, books, magazines and newspaper articles, public opinion polls, speeches, oral histories, original documents, so like a birth certificate or a property deed or a trial transcript, some sort of research data like a census. That's a pretty good primary source. That's, in fact, some of the primary sources that we have for the Anlushan Rebellion. Or that's one of the only primary sources that we have for that. Official and unofficial records of organizations and government agencies. A lot of government agencies love to keep records, and that's how we know so much about them because they took the time to consolidate and write all that stuff down. Artifacts of all kinds, tools, coins, clothing, furniture, those are all primary source or can all be primary sources. Government documents, reports, bills, proclamations, hearings, anything like that. That's not an exhaustive list, even though it seems like an exhaustive list. But a primary source is a source of somebody who saw it, who was there, who wrote about it, who photographed it, who drew it, who painted it, something from someone who saw it in the moment. A secondary source is someone who has secondhand information about it, who is using a primary source to write about that event. So it describes, discusses, interprets, comments upon, analyzes, evaluates, summarizes, and processes primary sources. Secondary sources are what we produce, what we as historians produce, what you all as historians will produce. So a bibliography, a biography, reference works like a dictionary, an encyclopedia, an atlas, an article in a magazine, a journal, a newspaper that happens after the event, history books or other popular or scholarly books. Those are all usually secondary sources. Works of criticism or interpretation. So our arguments that we're going to write, that's going to be a secondary source. A commentary or a treatise, a textbook. Those are all types of secondary sources. Primary sources was written by somebody who was there and saw the event. A secondary source is someone like us writing about that event using primary source as evidence. It's very important that you all understand the difference between a primary and a secondary source and that you know what it is. Can you give me a thumbs up if you understand or a thumbs down if you don't understand? And I can try and explain it a little bit better. Anything else that we're going to deal with in this class a lot are maps. They're just everywhere, but they're helpful and they're also not helpful. I love maps. My entire classroom at the school that I teach at is just full of maps. I have an enormous map the size of my bedroom wall just in my classroom because I love maps so much. But just like that map I showed you that was upside down, when we're talking about perspective, is maps can be very misleading sometimes. If you look and see this map here on the right, this is a map of Africa, and the borders are divided up by, I don't expect you guys to know this yet, but you will know it after we get through units 6 and 7. This right here is Algeria. Algeria did not exist until the French showed up and said, this is Algeria. Similar with Libya, similar with Tunisia, similar with Egypt. Egypt is one of the oldest civilizations on Earth, right along with the Indian civilizations and Chinese civilizations along the Yellow and Yangtze rivers. They're some of the earliest civilizations on Earth, but Egypt only identified along the Nile River. So this little boxy looking figure, that was a projection by the British. Same thing with Sudan. Sudan also doesn't exist anymore. It exists as Sudan and South Sudan because the British forced them all and smushed them all together. In 1959, a guy named Murdoch went through and charted an ethnic map of different ethnicities all throughout Africa. And it's hard to see because there are just so many different ethnic groupings. But for example, down here in this is modern day Namibia. Namibia was never a unified place until the Germans showed up and said, oh, by the way, you're all Namibian now, without taking into account that this ethnic group right here was the Herero. This ethnic group right here was the Ovambo. This ethnic group on the coast right here were the Twa. This ethnic group right here were the regular Herero, not the Ova Herero. They all just got smushed together. So keep that in mind. That happens to almost every country in the world. China was not a unified territory. It was never fully unified to its modern day borders until the British showed up and said, by the way, you're China. The United States, before it became the United States, was made up of 100, that's a low estimate, 1,000 different American Indian tribes. Canada was made up of a bunch of different First Nations peoples until Europeans showed up and said, oh, by the way, this is all Indian territory. You are all Indians and you are all the same. And it's ours now. So keep that in mind when we're talking about maps. Maps are useful, but they don't tell full stories. To close out on this part of it, my expectations for this class, I would very much appreciate if you guys were actively in attendance every session. If you can, I understand things happen. If you can't be here, that's okay. It happens. Just let me know. Active reading, and that just doesn't mean uh, an assignment. So anything that you encounter in this class, you have to actively be engaged with it. Active means you're doing it. You have to work with it. You can't have a YouTube video on in the background with it. Multitasking is impossible. If you can prove that it's not impossible, uh, submit it to peer review and you'll get your Nobel Prize for proving something that's not possible. Actively read, actively do your homework, actively do the classwork, actively do AP World History with me, and you'll be okay. I need you all to be critical thinkers and critical analysts. It's an essential skill for historians and it's an essential skill for students in general. When you all get to college, college is the great leveling place of leveling because college will take the students who are just there because someone made them or because they don't really want to be there or they're not sure that they want to be there, and it will weed you out. If you are a critical thinker and a critical analyst, you can critically think through any subject and use these skills to help you succeed not just in your academic career but in your life. How can you see through a terrible news story, or how can you see through a lie from a government unless you can critically think and critically analyze about it? My expectations also is understand that it's not just fact states, kings, wars, battles. I don't care about them as much as I care about the processes of how they happened. History is understanding, interpreting, questioning, contextualizing, corroborating, and arguing about evidence in the historical narrative. What each one of them is going to look like in a little bit more detail and a little bit more depth. Feel free to download these because I promise you they will not change. They're going to look identical, or the scores and your questions that you would get on May 7th next year are going to look just like this. I put these together with my brother, who is, I actually have an identical twin brother that we teach right next door to each other. He teaches AP US history, I teach AP world history, match made in heaven, or something like that. We put these together a few years ago, and they've served our students well, I think. So we've got our multiple choice question tips, our short answer question guide, our LEQ guides, and our DBQ guides. And the DBQ guides come directly from the course and exam description, which I'll go into a little bit more in a minute. Multiple choice questions. We're going to do a practice one of these next week. And we're also going to do practice short answer questions, LEQs, and DBQs, just to give you an introduction to them. But the multiple choice questions is worth 40% of the total exam, and it's testing four things. Content, do you know the material? I'm not talking about like you have to know that this soldier made this leap into the battle of whatever. No, general content. Do you know the broad strokes of what happened in the past? It's a comprehension test. Can you interpret source materials? Intuition. Are you generally clever? Do you have intuition? Some of these are going to try and trick you. I'm sorry to say, but that's the way that, excuse me, that's the way that College Board has designed them for some reason. They want to weed out the students who can't quite rationalize their way to an answer, but you all will be able to by the end of this class. And a preparedness test. Are you knowledgeable of the test format? I grade these every year in June, and every year you can tell which teachers actually taught their students what the test is going to look like and which ones didn't. Some of the students even give the answers of we weren't taught how to do this. And it's always very disheartening, but I'm going to make sure that you guys know how to do this. The multiple choice is made up of a lot of stimulus items. So predominantly text, but it could be a chart, a graph, a cartoon, a photograph, something, some sort of visual stimulus, something to stimulate your eyeballs. And there will generally be two or three or four questions associated with that one short paragraph or that one painting or that one photograph. What they want you to do is examine the documents and then do it one question at a time. Read the question carefully, and then you're going to choose the best answer. We're going to choose the most correct answer. We're not going to choose the correct answer. We're going to choose the one that's most correct. When you examine each document, you got to consider the historical period, the historical movements, the person being discussed. All these questions will be addressed in the topic. What the speaker's point of view is, whoever authored the document or whoever took the picture, It's going to be asking about their point of view and the context of the document. It's often more important than the document's content. A stimulus item is intended to stimulate knowledge that's already in your brain if it's there, which it will be, because you all will do all the work and we're going to be fine. It's the next part is consider the type of question that is asked. For each question, you're going to determine whether the stimulus is necessary. Can the question can or cannot be answered with or without the stimulus? Some of them you don't need to worry about it. You will be able to answer those questions. They'll just be that easy for you, and that's good. For some of them, about 25% of them, the stimulus will be helpful, and that's good. You should use it to help you where you can, because it should help you to remember what the answer is going to be. And then there are some that are just going to be unhelpful. It's just there to look pretty and to maybe be relevant in some way. Don't be fooled. This type of question often makes reference to the stimulus as if it matters, but you're going to learn how to ignore it when we do this. If it helps you, write an N, an H, or a U underneath of each stimulus. We'll practice this. I promise it's going to be okay. There are a couple of different ways that you can approach this. There's two that I'm going to teach you, and you're going to pick the one that's best for you. You can either eliminate your way to the correct answer, or you can do my other method, which we'll talk about later. But there are always going to be 4 answer choices: A, B, C, and D. So there are 3 reasons that one of the incorrect answers, which is also called a distractor, would be incorrect. It could be out of the time period. So if it's asking about the French Revolution, if the source is something that's talking about the American Revolution, you're 20 years too early. It could be irrelevant. The distractor could be in the same time period and make a correct statement, but it's not relevant to the question. When you see the word directly, you got to be on the lookout for irrelevant answers. And then there could be a distractor answer that is just false. It's a false statement. You know this. Trust your instincts. If it's untrue, then it's wrong. If it's helpful, you can write O for out of period, I for irrelevant, or W for wrong next to each one. It's just a different way to do it. Answers that meet the above criteria should be eliminated first, and then consider what's left. There should only be 1 or 2 in most cases. There's going to be one that's kind of correct and one that's the most correct. Pick the better answer. Sometimes you're going to have to guess, and that's okay. Your guess will probably be the right answer most of the time. Look for direct causes and effects. The new questions seem to use the word direct a lot in reference to cause and effect. Be wary of this. You have to read the question carefully, is the point that I'm trying to make. Use your historical thinking skills. The new questions, and I say new as in they began in 2019, I think was the redesign. So for the last 6 years, the new questions have emphasized historical thinking skills. Remember, that's our 3 C's: comparisons, cause and effects, change in continuity over time, or periodization. So be ready to use those skills when taking these answers. Still, I think the questions, this is just my personal belief. I'm not certain of this, but this is what they've always looked like to me. I think the questions start with more basics and move on to more interpretive questions. And the answers you give to one of the first questions might affect how you approach the questions that follow. It looks like that. If that looks to be the case, you should always answer the questions in order because they build on each other. If there's one that you just don't know, just skip it. You can come back to it later and it'll be fine. A few more words of advice on this is you can read the example. You all know how to read. Finish it. There was 55 questions in 55 minutes. You cannot get negative points for having a wrong answer, but you cannot get points if you don't have an answer. If you see the timer running, take a guess. Take your best shots and just answer it and move on. You don't have time to look at the questions twice. Help is not going to come from anyone. Every resource that you will have is already in front of you. Either you know it or you don't. If you don't know it, then you don't know it. Move on to the next one because you'll probably know the next one. Be focused 100% of the time. On May 7th at 8 a.m., you have to be focused. You have to be ready to get there. You have to be ready to do it. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. 55 questions means a minute per question. Be willing to be wrong. You're going to leave some out there, and it's okay. Trying to get every item right and spending too much time on a difficult question is going to work against you because if you do know the questions towards the end of the test and you spent too much time on question 12, then you don't have time to answer questions 50 through 55. You're not going to get it right every time, but you will get it right most of the time. Don't second guess yourself. Go with your gut. If you think it's right, the longer you agonize over a question, the more it's going to seem, oh, maybe it could be. Don't worry about it. Just do what's in front of you. Do what you can do. That is the very, very crash introduction into multiple choice questions. And I know I'm going fast, but I promise we're going to go over these in so much more detail and we're going to practice them a lot this year. Once we all get access to AP Classroom, we'll do several practice multiple choice questions, and I'll do the first few of them with you so you can see how to do them. Moving on to the short answer questions. The short answer questions are so easy. They are so easy, and I'm going to teach you how to. There's a little acronym that I use called ACE. You're going to ace the short answer questions. You'll answer something, you'll cite something, you'll explain your answer. In 3 sentences, you can completely do this. If you take 9 questions and divide that by the 40 minutes that you have for 20% of your exam score, that's about a little over 4 minutes per question. That is so much time. SAQ section is designed to give you enough time. Take 12 minutes per question. So each question has 3 parts to it. So that's about 4 minutes per part. You can plan it out. Each question is going to have A, B, and C. These parts are scored separately. You cannot get partial points on the SAQ. You can't get partial points on any of the writing. Either you answered it correctly or you didn't. But it is so easy to answer these correctly. There will be 4 questions. The first one is going to be a secondary source analysis. I mark this in, lock it in the chat, lock in your answers now because it's going to be a secondary source. It is probably, I'm 99% sure, going to be a paragraph from a textbook or an article. It's going to require you to analyze 1 or 2 secondary sources. If there's 2, it's going to be a comparison question. And then you're going to have to use a little bit of outside evidence to answer the question. But it's so easy. And once we do practice ones of them, it's going to make a lot of sense. The second one, I promise you, lock this into the chat now. Write it down, tell your mom. If I am wrong, I'm not wrong. I promise you it's going to be a primary source. It will most likely be an image, but this past year, so a few months ago, it was actually a text-based document for all of my students. Out of the last 10 years, I'm pretty sure 9 of the 10 years have been images of some variety. It will be skill-based, using a primary source, could be written, but it'll most likely be visual to assess causation or comparison using the source material and outside evidence. Here's where it gets fun. For questions 3 and questions 4, the first question 3 is going to come from period 1 through 5 or unit 1 through 5. The second question is going to come from units 5. That should say 5. I'm sorry, 5 through 9. You only have to pick one of them. If you are unsure of it, go with the one that you know the best. If they didn't want you, if question 4 is too easy, then they shouldn't have offered you that question. If question 3 is the one that you've got, they shouldn't have offered that to you. It's there in front of you. You only pick one of them. And that's how you are, you pick one of them and you answer them. There will be no stimulus. It's just, do you know it or do you not? And it's going to be general and broad enough that you'll be able to identify it. And I promise you, there are 9 points just sitting here waiting for you to take them. Just take those points because you can get them. Some tips to answer the short answer question is going to make so much sense when we practice them. It's not an essay. It's formulaic. Ace it. Answer, cite, explain. It's not about right answers and wrong answers. You can't be wrong in history so long as you can back up your answer with evidence. The best way to answer an SAQ is to be direct and to the point. Don't whiffle waffle about. Answer the question. If you write 4 sentences, that's probably too much. If you can't do it in 3, then you're doing it wrong. I teach, the way that I like to teach is I want you all to do it in 2 sentences with a single clause in the second sentence. Your first answer is, here's the answer. Your second sentence will be, this is because, and whatever it's because of, comma, for example, this piece of evidence. And it's as simple as that. You have earned a point. Write incomplete sentences. Do, do not do sentence fragments. The easiest way to trick the graders into, it's not even a trick. The easiest way to let the graders know that you know what you're talking about is to write incomplete, complex sentences. No sentence fragments. Every part of the question, there's going to be 3 parts of each question, can be answered in about 2 or 3 sentences. This is outdated. It will be digital, so don't worry about that. Most SAQ answers use 2 to 3 sentences. You have all the space that you need. You don't have to answer the questions in order, and it will give you a little button that you can push, like this is question 2 and this is question 4. It'll be fine. This is also outdated as well. Forget about that because it's going to be all digital now. That's the introduction to how to answer short answer questions. Those are very easy. It's going to make a lot of sense when we practice them. I want to go into a little bit of detail about the LEQ and the DBQ. If you know how to do an LEQ, then you know how to do a DBQ. And if you know how to do a DBQ, then you know how to do an LEQ. A DBQ has documents, and LEQ doesn't have documents, but they're basically the same type of question. It will ask you to evaluate something, evaluate the extent to which the reign of terror was justified during the French Revolution, for example. And there are 6 points that you can earn in an LEQ. The first point that you can earn is the context point, broader historical context relevant to the prompt. The second point that you can earn is the thesis point. This is 1 paragraph right here, the thesis and the context. We will practice them. You'll be able to write them. You're going to be able to write these with your eyes closed in your sleep. They are so easy to do. For the LEQ, you must have 2 pieces of evidence, at least 2 pieces of evidence, which you can do. Every question will be broad and general enough that you can have a quasi vague but still specific enough piece of evidence that you can use. And one paragraph, so your second paragraph, will be your first piece of evidence. Your third paragraph will be your second piece of evidence. You have 3 paragraphs there, and you're in good shape. If you do that and you use a specific or 2 specific examples, so at least 2, this is from College Board, you will get the third point, the first evidence point. To get the fourth point, the second evidence point, you have to all you have to do, and I promise you it's this easy. Explain how your example supports your argument. Whatever your argument is, example 1 supports my argument because of these reasons. Example 2 supports my argument because of those reasons. And you have sufficiently answered it to earn 4 points. Earning 4 points is very easy to do, and you all are going to be able to do it by the end of this class. Our 5th point is called the analysis and reasoning point. That's where we use our historical reasoning skills, our 3 C's. I told you they're important. So our 4th paragraph is going to be either comparison or causation or change in continuity over time. Write 1 paragraph about that. If the question is about the French Revolution, compare it to the Haitian Revolution. If the question is about, what else is there? If the question is about imperialism in Africa, compare it to imperialism in China. If the question is about whatever, compare it to whatever. Or you could do causation or change in continuity over time. The 5th point is more challenging to earn, but it's still very, very achievable. The 6th point and the final point, the second analysis and reasoning point, is called the complexity point. And the complexity point used to be what we call it the unicorn point because it was, and I hate to say this, it used to be vibes. Like, does this feel like a 6-point paper? But now there's a definable way to do it, or a definable way to earn it. As of this past year, when they updated, not this past year, the year before, so the beginning of 2023, if you use 4 pieces of evidence, that counts as complexity. If you do multiple historical reasonings, that counts as complexity. So if you compare several pieces of evidence, and if you use causation in several pieces of evidence, or if you demonstrate change in continuity over time in addition to 1 or 2 of these other ones, That will count as the complexity point, and you will have earned all 6 points. It sounds challenging. We're going to practice them. We're going to practice them a lot. You're going to be able to do these so easily. That's the LEQ. If you want a nice, tidy version of this, I also have the course at a glance. This is what we're going to look at this year in this class. It's based on units. It's broken up generally chronologically. So we'll talk about the global tapestry from 1200 to 1450. That's East Asia, Dar al Islam, South and Southeast Asia, state building in the Americas, state building in Africa, state building in Europe, and then comparisons. Unit 2, networks of exchange. That's the Silk Road, the Indian Ocean Trade Network, the Trans-Saharan Trade Network. Those are so important to understand. Land-based empires. Those are the Mongol empires, which breaks up and becomes separate empires. So the Shogunates, the Ilkhanates, the Khanate of the Golden Horde, and the Khanate of the Great Khan. That's what those are. Then that turns into the gunpowder empires eventually. Transoceanic connections. This is basically the Columbian Exchange when the world becomes interconnected again. That's what this chapter is all about, is the Columbian Exchange and the rise of European maritime empires. The fifth unit, revolutions. The Enlightenment, nationalism and revolutions, the Industrial Revolution, the most important thing that's ever happened in the modern world, in the entire world, I should say. Industrialization all over the world, technology, different economic developments, reactions to industrialism. Then the consequences of industrialization, this is mostly imperialism. So rationales for imperialism, state expansion, that means Europeans expanding into Africa and Asia. Indigenous response to state expansions, that's uprisings. The 1857 Indian Uprising comes to mind. Economic imperialism, migration and interconnectedness in the world. Unit 7 is global conflict. So that's the first 20th century Chinese Revolution until 1912, and the Russian revolutions, both of them, World War One, the interwar period, World War Two, and then we spent a little bit of time on mass genocide. Then the Cold War, everything that happened after 1945, and then the final unit is globalization. This one is looking at something, a painting called American Progress. If you haven't seen this before, I'd be very surprised because this is a very famous image from 19th century America. But this source or this painting right here is called American Progress, originally painted by a guy named John Gast in 1872. It depicts the process of manifest destiny. Now, manifest destiny was white Europeans who became Americans. They said to themselves, "It is our manifest destiny to reach from sea to shining sea." Basically, they wanted to reach from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. So this woman right here is the caricature of America. Her name is Columbia. Most countries, well, not most, some countries have something like this. In Britain, her name is Britannia. In Russia, her name is Mother Russia. In Germany, her name is Germania. In France, her name is Marianne. But in America, because Columbus is discovered America, we call her Columbia. And it's Columbia carrying a telephone or a telegraph line from east to west, where these white planters and white settlers are chasing the indigenous Americans and chasing the buffalo towards the west. And you can see the pioneers back here coming out of a city that could be Boston, that could be Philadelphia, that could be Cleveland, Ohio, it could be Toronto, it could be any city in any major city in the west, or I'm sorry, in the east, of people moving to the west. So what I would like you to do is take a moment to look at the painting and then answer the following question. The painting American Progress helps historians understand the history of white Americans and westward expansion in the 19th century. Do you agree or disagree with that statement? And I'd like you to briefly explain your answer. So when you're answering that, think about the who, what, when, where, and why of what we've been talking about so far in this class. But to do all this, what I would really like you to do first is look at what's the historical context of this image. I just gave you a little bit of it. Who's the intended audience for this image? What's its purpose? What's the point of view of the author for this image? And what do you think the main argument is? So, if you could, I'd like to take the last couple of minutes of this class tonight because I think we go till 8:30, um, and see if you guys could just fill this out, and we'll make this our first grade for the class. And I promise you, I am not look. It doesn't. There are no right or wrong answers. The thing that I care about the most out of my students is: did you give your best effort? Did you try? If you didn't understand, did you ask? That's what I care about. I care about you guys trying to learn history. So go ahead and make a copy of this. You can save it wherever you want, and that way you can upload it to me so I can read them and I can grade them. Does that sound good? Are you all with me?